Hello, everyone. We are in the April Grant Globe class pass, and I'm doing this a little differently this month. Instead of having a deck of slides that we're looking at, I want to expand on a recent Substack article that I've posted about starting a resource revolution and really thinking about how this idea of what is grantable includes our collective and community care models. So, what do I mean by all of those terms? When we're thinking about the grant system and structure as it is, we're usually thinking about money as the resource that's, the sort of haves have access to, and then the have-nots, everyone applying to the grants are seeking. But that is inherently a very problematic power dynamic and structure. So, what I would like for us to be revisiting and rebuilding as we're pursuing grant funding and also creating our own grant networks is to play around and reestablish what a grant is, what is grantable, and how we all actually have something that we can grant as members of a community or a collective care model. And also being able to have really nuanced understandings of what it is that we then are seeking and need to receive. And so when we think about this through a more standard sort of grant lens, when we're looking at grant applications and we're writing our grant, proposals and reports, I often encourage people to think about and identify which of your project costs or needs have to come from cash, right? Because you're being expected to pay someone. What could be provided by bartering or sharing services? What could come from material exchange? So maybe you have a corporate sponsor that instead of you having to pay for art supplies, they're giving you a $500 credit at their establishment to go ahead and purchase things for your project. There's a variety of different ways that we can look at what it is that we're asking to be, how we're asking to be supported. And so when we take that and we're breaking this down into this idea of collective care models and how, especially in the context in the United States, with the degree of uncertainty that we are facing as systems are understandably necessarily just being dismantled, and also that affects the average person far more than it does any of the decision makers deciding to carry this out the way that they are, right? That while we cannot control what is happening, what we do have agency over is how we are collectivizing our experience through it and creating those alternative and more sustainable, more human based and human centered practices and systems in their place. So I will link the recent article in this podcast overview and make sure that you have access to that because there are, I believe, almost or over 20 questions that go through, the who, what, where, when, why, how type of prompt. That helps you identify some of those resources that you have that you could exchange, what skills you have that you could teach, what skills are you looking to be taught, what resources do you need as a way to get more clear on how you might want to start having, if you're not already, these collective care conversations. So, that being said, what I wanted to focus on today was really thinking about that part is how to have these conversations and how practicing through the existing structure of grant writing or looking for corporate sponsorships or community engagement opportunities can help build that muscle for the sort of, out of business mode in real life type of conversations that you're just having with your neighbors, your community members, relatives. So, when we are responding to an RFP or request for proposal, what we're doing is we're again seeing that menu of what a funder is looking for, what they're wanting to put their name on, so to speak. And that RFP gives us, as well as their website, any other information they provide, gives us the sense of what their priorities are, who they're coming to be in support of, what they want to be known for, etc. And so, in previous workshops or, the class pass sessions, what I have been sharing is that we're able to then allow that be the filter through which we're sharing our story, not to change or augment what we have to say, but to make sure it's the taste or the palate that they'll be receptive to that way. We have a greater likelihood that they're going to actually review our work and be able to see and experience the impact of what we're doing. So then when we're thinking about how does that apply outside of the space, you can think about the conversations, the interactions you've had, let's say with family members. You already know, you may not let yourself, but you already know who seems approachable in terms of who will have an honest conversation with you, who will have a vulnerable conversation with you, who will shut down, who is likely to bypass you and or gaslight you and really make it seem like there's something wrong with you having these interests or questions or concerns. That gets to all essentially be like what they've shown you. That is their RFP in many ways. That is their website, right? It's how they're giving you information. And so we can have this practice that's built off of something that my mentor Felicia Savage Friedman of Yoga Roots on Location says, that being a critical lover. Can we hold that this evidence is part of our lived experience and it's telling us something? Can we hold that gently enough to also be observant and curious of if in this current moment, is there an opportunity to try to engage again? Do we want to engage again? Have we decided to go no contact, which is totally valid, and then you stay no contact, right? But can there be a moment where, considering the current world and the ecosystem that you're navigating in this very, moment when you're hearing this, can there be a moment to sort of go back through that Rolodex of people and say, who does it feel safe and worthwhile to reach out to? And let that be information. Okay. Now, when we're thinking about perhaps place of employment, coworkers, community groups, businesses that you frequent, if you have third spaces you have access to, again, that similar thought of which of these environments feels supportive of me as a person, of the values that I uphold, that I've seen them treat other people with kindness and respect, right? That they're providing those examples that they might be willing to be a collaborator in this collective care model. Again, right? And then you can go further out too of, are there regional, statewide, national initiatives that you can volunteer and be a part of, learn from their model. They have classes every quarter on topics of collective care or resource redistribution. Do you have local co-ops? Right. You essentially, again, are creating that radius and we're letting it ripple out of where your focus is. But being able to understand that even outside of the literal grant context of here's an RFP, here's our website, this is what I know about them, that we get to apply and leverage those skills in the networks and communities that we're naturally a part of in our day-to-day life. And so what do we then do with that? By having, and again, going through those questions in that article that I'll link, having a sense too of what you have to contribute and what feels like the amount of lift that you can currently navigate. For some of us, it may not feel like it's much. It's totally valid. If you're saying once a month, I'm going to call my local library, see if they have any donations or resources that they need, and I can see if I can drop something off, right? Your threshold of what you can access gets to be enough, and it gets to be more than enough, okay? But from that place, what we're then able to do is we're able to start rewiring our emotional, how do I want to do this? Like our emotional network. It's like mycelium, right? You're starting to recalibrate how your body feels having conversations, acknowledging the world around you, the chaos around you, and also starting to sort of untangle some of these narratives that might be outdated from other parts of our life or not as relevant because like the story of them is not as relevant because we're in you're navigating a different time, you're a different phase in your life, there are different people in your life, right? But you're able to see how you have this transferable set of skills, but also starting to say, this is what I'm deciding to prioritize now. These are the values, right? Like that I'm building from right here. This is what foot I want to put forward, so to speak. And that from creating collective care models and communities from that sense, allows you to then, again, essentially you're peeling this onion, you're getting a layer deeper. You're able to then understand, okay, now that I have a little bit more of a bearings of where I am in this current moment of life, I get to acknowledge that I did not get here alone. In terms of looking at like family systems theory and some of the practices about, okay, there was a ecosystem around me that I was a part of, whether it was functional, dysfunctional, like all those dynamics. Yes, absolutely acknowledging those. And also, as we're peeling back each of these layers, we're getting closer and closer to the indigenous wisdoms that have long established and also long silenced foundations and skills and practices for communal care, collective care, ecological care, right? And so essentially by doing the work on ourselves and within our communities, we're creating more of a space, more of a tenderness, more of a courageous, willingness to allow those ancestral and indigenous wisdoms to take root. Well, really, they're already rooted. To allow ourselves to for them to be the valid and really stabilizing forces that they already are. We're essentially reacclimating our willingness to let them guide and lead, because we do have to, just like we were challenging grants as a system, was like, oh, there has to be this formal like philanthropist organization, and they have to, all these parameters, and that's the only, people that are quote willing of these funds are the people who can do XYZ, improve this or that, right? A lot of this gatekeeping that happens, right? If we're looking at how to change the ideas of what's grantable and what we're really doing with our work and our services, we are not creating from absolute scratch or nothing. There, at no point are we saying nothing that is helpful or usable exists yet. We have to create this all here, right? Because it's also just a different flavor of white supremacy, delusional culture. There absolutely are very supportive, nourishing foundations and practices on which to build. It's really about understanding that while we're simultaneously adopting and pouring into those practices, there's also some of our own shit we have to be undoing. So, oof, I'm dropping the phone off the steering wheel. We're in, for people not watching the video, we are in my car office. My car office, really, it's the mom fist, the mom van office, but I haven't figured out the right term for it now that I have the mom van and not a car. But I was dropping the phone off the steering wheel, which is what we're doing. But we will refocus for a moment. So, what are we doing with this information, this idea? By having these conversations, and even now, like me sharing and recording this out, what we're also doing is realizing that we are change makers, and really in the philanthropic space, agents of change, right? There's a lot of this terminology. But we are capable of influencing our own behaviors and practices, of setting examples for others, and inviting people in to do something together. Having intentional sort of unionships, right? Of here's how we're doing this, here are the values that we're agreeing upon, here's how we're going to practice repair in these relationships. Because the idea behind the grant glow up is not just having a glow up where like your grant writing sounds better. Cool, great, okay. It's truly about having this resource revolution of what actually is something that's grantable, what's a grantable idea, right? How do we build towards this idea that if I'm saying I have an excess of chickpeas for whatever reason, I have 12 cans of chickpeas and I'm realizing I'm the only one in my family eating them. I don't want 12. I'd be fine the rest of the year with like 4. Like I don't need the rest, but I have 8 left. And someone else was like, you know what? I actually really love chickpeas, and I have this lawnmower, but I have a really little yard. Like I'm not really using it much. Oh my gosh, cool. Do you want to mow my lawn? And I will give you 8 cans of chickpeas. Right? Yes. Am I describing the barter type system? Yes, that's the whole point. That's an indigenous wisdom. That is something that existed before that gets to have its place. Yes, there's absolutely the reality and the challenge of many aspects of our life right now don't exist in that way because we have to pay for things with cash. That's the whole point of knowing what do you have to pay in cash? What can you exchange goods and services for? What do you have in excess of resources where at this point just hoarding, you just don't need it, that you can give away? And also, what ratio can you personally afford to do to give away for free in terms like you're not getting anything physical in exchange versus that example of swapping a physical good, right, of chickpeas for a service of mowing your grass, right? Just asking ourselves to reawaken this spirit of exchange that's actually between the two, or the people in the exchange, right? Because under the current capitalistic situationship, we are being told what a valid exchange is and how to do it in those terms and conditions. And also, as those stressors continue to mount and systems are changing and all of the things that we're currently navigating, there's going to be an increase in the need for these very specific, personalized, mutually decided upon exchanges and collaborative approaches to things than what currently exists. Because when, as a society, we are taught to and expected to function off of what we're told, like do what you're told, don't question your elder, like those types of sayings. That's why, and this is putting my sociologist hat on, right? That is why having higher rates of community level violence and domestic violence and the types of challenges that happen are why those things are likely going to be increasing over the next few months to years. An aspect of that is because we have this collective amnesia, this atrophy in the ability to have our own meaning making systems, to agree in small groups and intimate groups about what of shared value is, what those sort of terms and conditions are, what sort of doing right by ourselves and each other looks like, and our ability to reconnect with that muscle, flex that muscle, so to speak, to utilize those practices will have a direct impact on the quality of life that we are able to, as communities, be able to support for one another. Because this individualized, pull yourself up by your bootstrap hellscape that we are in is going to continue to push people to an edge that as humanity weren't designed to be at, and to increase the amount of dis-ease and harm that we're doing to ourselves and others. And so really it's like, how can this idea of a resource revolution really be this returning to what is known by some and has been shunned by others, and allowing ourselves to do the amount of work we need to embrace them, right? And so acknowledging that I, as a white woman talking about indigenous and ancestral practices, knowing that I am not in any space of learned expertise or privilege, or learned expertise to speak about them as if they are my own and, right, something that I've been practicing my whole life, because that is not true. And also, I have a social responsibility and moral obligation to both acknowledge the privilege that I've been born into and that I've experienced in my life, and also model and be at fault at times and practice repair through the soul experience what it looks like to imagine how life could be if we're actually living it as humans together. And that part does feel like something that was innate in childhood, right before societal expectations and family of origin dynamics and everything took over, right? Because my whole thing about reparenting your parent is that as children, we were all born knowing exactly who we are. And at some point along those early child development years, external forces told us what to shine, what to dim, what was right and what was wrong. and sort of massaged, never resculpted our clay, right? Manipulated our beingness into, whichever sort of voices and forces were the loudest. That sort of, impacted who we became. And why I bring that up again is this just really acknowledging that, some it might seem a little like, oh, why is someone talking about reparenting also talking about grants and resources? To me, they're just different kaleidoscope angles of a very similar thing, right? It's different focal points of this overall reminder that, you know, that my role here and why I'm even doing this classes every month and all of these various things of the way that I'm showing up and being of service is that I just really on like a cellular level, like in my innermost beingness, I am fueled by this belief that embodying imagination and embracing imagination through embodied improvisation is what I'm here to do, right? And so the tools that I've learned through life, the tools that I've learned in a career, one is grant writing, right? And so that's a lens through which I'm looking at this. What I've learned through lived experience and working through my own shit and my sociology background and, all these different layers of lived experience has led me to this idea of reparenting your inner parent, leave your inner child the fuck alone, right? And when I strip away all those, words, the truest, tendril is reminding us all, myself included, that there's a whole cosmos of possibilities. There are the biggest picture across the galaxy is life. There's life to live. And how I particularly myself and trying to contribute to that humanely is that idea or that curiosity of how can we embrace imagination through embodied improvisation. My whole grant writing technique is based off of the embodied improvisational frameworks I have. So is how I do inner parenting, right? That to me is what I know I'm here to do. And there's just again the different avenues or lenses. So in sharing all that, my call out to all of you is to really have that reflective practice, in addition to what has already been shared out about being curious on how the skills of like looking at RFP or websites and reaching out for applications or sponsorships and all of that, how can that actually inform the meaning making and community making and collective care models in your day-to-day life? And can you have a reflective practice, sometime, which the next, we'll say 1 week after you listen to this, right? To just make it a little more tangible and, of a practice. Asking yourself too, acknowledging, okay, what sort of skill sets or lanes or avenues, what practices am I engaging in, right? That might be a certain profession, a field, a tool. And if I had to remove, like, think of those as the delivery method. This is how you're doing the work you're here to do on earth. Okay, cool. Strip those away. What are you actually doing? What does it feel like? The true sort of message you're here to get across, the impact that you want to have, the value that you want to live through. Getting so clear on that, because that is going to be your internal why, right? And my day job, part of creating and publishing this intrinsic motivation model it's a youth serving nonprofit, so really looking at teen engagement and right and helping them go from an extrinsic motivation for joining the program to an intrinsic motivation to sustaining their lifelong learning well beyond their time in our program in high school and beyond. So by acknowledging again that you might have these certain tools, avenues, frameworks in which you're doing the work that you're doing, the way you're showing up as yourself. Oh, I love that hat. Cool. Take that hat off right underneath of it. What is the essence of you? If you had to write, and this was a practice we did in my anti-racist yoga teacher training that Felicia Savage Friedman created and facilitates through Yoga Roots on Location. One of our activities, one of our homework practices was we had to write our own obituary and like epithet, that word, right? What would be on our tombstone, essentially. right? And so, invitation to do a similar type practice of, in 3 to 10 words, right? 'Cause some of us are a little wordier. I know I am. In 3 to 10 words, how would you describe yourself? The true essence of your being. And can you allow that to be valid and to fuel you as that intrinsic motivation? Because that is going to become the why that sustains you through anything that's to come. All right. So my mouth is getting dry. I'm taking that as my cue that our time here is up. But I so value and appreciate you tuning in and catching up on the replays and all of the things, because it is together that we are going to re-earth ourselves back into the true possibility of life on earth together. And essentially the more we work through our own shit and our collective shit together, that it actually gets to be composted and right and it gets to be all nutritive. I'm starting my second garden this year, right? Like I gardened last year for the first year, so I'm like, now my random garden and composting examples are relevant because I have lived experience. Wow. So one shout out to the kale plant that has absolutely thrived in uh throughout winter. Like I just assumed it would die off because I didn't harvest in time. Oh no, it is just like massive and sprouting, and we at one point had over a foot of snow just showing on the ground. So shout out to kale plant, you're the real one. And also, just like have a razzle dazzle day. And as I say, if that's not accessible, put an F on front and have a frazzle dazzle day. And may all of our funding wishes be granted. And when they're not, I'm here with you along the way, because we are changing those tides ever in our favor, and truly looking at ourselves as well equipped and well resourced, like revolutionaries, really, in that sense of really acknowledging that some shit has to go and that we are not starting from nothing, that we have our lived experience, we're the expert of that, and also we have lineages of different lived experiences. And as stewards of the earth, we get to learn from those who are connected to and able to access those indigenous wisdoms from before time when whiteness had to just go fuck everything up. So, adios. Oh no, that was fucked up. Goodbye. Sorry. I'm semi trilingual, but I know that I'm white and look it. So, apologies if that was a very random adios or goodbye. But oftentimes my brain is going between English and Spanish and now Greek. So I'm learning Greek also. So again, perfect example. White lady, gonna mess up, do white lady shit. Apologize, repair. Hold me accountable. I'm holding myself accountable, and we will reconvene soon. So I will see you all next month. I do have an actual closing. I'm gonna slow down. My brain is rebooting. So next month, we have our class pass again in May. I might be shifting the weeks, which I will follow up and confirm, because I do have something that came up with my kiddo that may make that third Thursday not possible. But if that is true, I will let you know. So that might be rescheduled, but we are finishing up. This was week 5 of the Grant Glow Up community program on beta. Amazing time is being had. There's one more week at ends next week. I am like shouting from the car tops, right? How fucking wonderful it has been. The participants in there have already, the whole thought was like, okay, let's get an application out in 6 weeks. They have applied to multiple things. And beyond that, that's just like the transactional thing where it's like, get to people and, oh, I can submit an application that soon. No, when I tell you that each person has said, in their own words, that they are totally seeing their work and their impact on the world completely differently. They already have opportunities where, like, just from sharing their experiences that go along, people are reaching out to them. There are entire full movements and initiatives happening within these 5 weeks where they're saying that they didn't even have that on their radar as something that was possible last month. And I'm like, yeah, of course. So everything that I just shared out today, about the larger thought with an vision for the Grant Glow Up to be this resource revolution, it's happening, and it's so fucking exciting. So the next cohort of the Grant Glow Up community program is starting in May. So I believe May 2nd is a Monday. Don't quote me on the exact dates. Again, I'm in the car. I'm just going off of memory. We know what that is as a postpartum primary parent. So we are starting in May. If you want in, absolutely come in. I'm going to be updating the info page next week. I just want to make sure I have the more up-to-date case studies and testimonials from folks who are in the current cohort. And absolutely, please come in. I am so excited. It is just blowing my mind. And what I love the most is that the actual idea of writing a grant or how to do the grant has been the least interesting thing that's happened. Yes, that has happened. That actually happened. Each cohort member by the beginning of week 3 had already submitted something. Right. And it wasn't even the focus. It's everything else that's happening, from getting the one-on-one insights that I'm sharing, and then the group dynamic, being able to say, oh, you helped me see my own work in this other way because I see myself in your story, or all of those beautiful marinations that are happening when we're doing this work collectively. So I am so excited, and I'm so excited for you and your glow up and how this is all coming into place. I'm so excited. So absolutely mark May and half of June in your calendar if you feel like this is right for you. I'm just so excited. And just hop in. We're going to be there. We're going to be there together. We meet Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern time for an hour. And it is just a wonderful time. So I'm actually gonna go now. My mouth is super dry in the car, but I so appreciate you all. Reach out if you have anything. Again, email us hello@loricrawford.me. You can also, if you're watching this on Substack or thing, just comment there, or on socials. I'm your inner parent guide with periods between each word. So just go have a wonderful snack, hydrate, take a nap, scrub your scalp, put on your favorite pair of socks. Go do those things. Okay. Bye.